Snow clawed sideways through the pines. It moved in long skeins across the forest floor, catching in the frozen thorns, turning the world into a gauzy white nothing. Among the deadwood, beneath a sky smothered by cloud, stood a woman in a wedding dress. The lace was yellowed from age and road dust. Her veil clung wetly to her face. Beneath it, her lips were blue. She had not moved in 3 hours. She stood at the edge of a clearing, hem frozen to the ground, her breath weak in the air. A house stood across from her, a two-room shack with broken windows and a blackened chimney, but she did not approach it. She only watched it like a curse might watch its maker. The dress had once been beautiful, not hers, though. Stolen. From a woman who died badly in a mining town long since buried under rockfall. The bride wore it without care for its past. Her hands were bruised. The skin peeled at the knuckles from where she'd torn her way through thorn and barbed wire, from where she'd held tight to the axe handle in the dark hours before dawn. That handle was gone now. She dropped it somewhere near the riverbank where she lost her shoes. She was barefoot now. Ice clung to her toes like barnacles. She did not know how long she'd stood there, waiting. The wind tore at her veil, plastered it across her cheek. She didn't blink. From inside the house came the faintest creak of movement, a footstep, a chair scraping the floor. The bride did not react. She remembered the last thing he said to her. If you leave, you die cold. If you stay, you die slow. That was his promise. He had smiled when he said it, his teeth crooked from where a mule had kicked them. She'd watched that smile as he locked the shack door from the outside and rode off laughing into the white. He hadn't meant she'd survive the walk. She had. Barely. Behind her, the trail was long and broken with blood. 3 men were dead in the woods. She made sure of it. The 4th was in that shack, drinking. The bride waited because dying in the snow was cleaner than going back in. She would stay there until her blood thickened and her skin went waxy and death folded her in like a blanket. That had been the plan, but the stranger ruined it. The stranger arrived like a wound, quiet at first and then unforgettable. A horse broke the silence with a soft whicker, the sound of hooves crunching snow. The bride didn't look, her eyes were fixed on the house. "Miss," came a voice behind her. A man's voice, tired and low. She didn't respond. Her throat felt sealed. The man dismounted, bootsteps sinking. He came around her slow, keeping his distance like he was dealing with a wild thing, something injured and cornered. "You ain't all right," he said. Her eyes flicked to him. He looked like a drifter. Tall, unshaven, with a gray coat slick with road grime. His boots were patched. A rifle was slung across his back, but he didn't touch it. The wind howled. He waited. "You waiting for someone in there?" he asked, nodding toward the shack. She shook her head. The veil shifted. "Then what?" His voice softened. "You freezing out here for a reason." The bride's lips parted, cracked and bloodless. She said nothing. The man watched her a while, then reached slowly into his coat. She tensed. He held his hands out. From one of them he drew a flask. From the other, a biscuit wrapped in cloth. He placed them in the snow between them and stepped back. "That's for you, take it or not. I'll be on my way." She stared at the items, then at him. Her jaw trembled. He turned to go. And then, like a dying match flaring once more, she spoke. "There's someone in there." He paused. "I thought you said." "Not someone I'm waiting for." The man studied the shack, the low roof, the soot-stained windows. His eyes narrowed. "Should I go knock?" She almost smiled. It came out bitter. "You knock, he'll shoot." The man's hand went to the rifle on his back. "You want him dead?" he asked. The bride looked away. "I want him to know what it feels like." What feels like?" "Being alone in the snow. With no one left to hurt." The stranger was quiet a long time. The wind moved between them. Then he said, "I can help you." She looked at him sharply. "I didn't ask." He nodded. But I ain't walking off knowing you'll freeze here like that. Why? Because you're still standing. That stopped her. The bride blinked, slowly, like she hadn't realized until that moment that her legs still held her. She stared at the flask in the snow. The cloth-wrapped food, her stomach twisted. Behind them, the shack door creaked. The stranger went still. The bride turned. A man stepped into the doorway, squinting against the snow. He wore a fur coat stained at the cuffs. His beard was thick with crumbs. He carried a shotgun lazily. "Wasn't expecting no preacher out here," he called. The bride's breath hitched. The stranger didn't move. "Go back inside," she whispered, but the man on the porch had seen her. His smile came slow. "Well, I'll be damned. Thought the wolves got you." The stranger moved forward a step. "She with you?" the man asked, eyes shifting. "She ain't yours," the stranger said. The man laughed. "She's in my house, wearing my things." "I reckon she is." The bride didn't hear what the stranger said next. Her ears rang, her knees nearly gave, because the cold wasn't killing her anymore. Something else was rising, not warmth, not hope, something darker, older, and it was awake. He didn't draw the rifle. The stranger stood with one hand resting near the strap, but he didn't reach for it. He didn't flinch when the man on the porch raised the shotgun slightly. Snow caught on the barrel. "Best if you go on your way," the man said, licking his teeth. "This here ain't your concern." "She's standing in the snow half dead, dress torn, no boots, no coat," the stranger said. "Looks like concern found me." The man's smile fell. "Last fellow who meddled's feeding buzzards." The stranger nodded slowly, as if filing that away. Then he looked back at the bride. "What's your name?" She opened her mouth. No sound came. The man on the porch scoffed. "She don't talk much." "Got that beaten out, I reckon." The bride flinched. The stranger looked at her a moment longer, then turned back toward the house. "She got a name, or don't she?" The man's jaw tensed. "Did once. Don't need it now." The stranger took another step forward, boots sinking. "I think she does." The air thickened. Inside the bride's chest, something burned, not warm like fire, something colder than the wind, sharper than bone. It clawed upward like roots from frozen ground. "I'll say it once," the man warned, lifting the shotgun. He didn't get to say anything else. The bride moved first. She lunged for the axe. It had been buried hours ago, beneath the snow to hide the blood on it. She hadn't thought she'd need it again, but her hands remembered. She drove forward with a cry that cracked open something inside her. The man on the porch turned, startled, just as she came up the steps. The butt of the axe caught his jaw. The shotgun went wide, barked once, tore splinters from the doorway. She didn't stop. She struck again, then again. By the time he fell, her hands were slick. The stranger didn't move. When the silence came back, heavy and sudden, the only sound was the bride's breath, ragged, hoarse, alive. She stood over the man, veil half torn, fingers clenched white around the axe handle. Her knees buckled. The stranger caught her. He didn't say anything. He didn't ask. He just wrapped his coat around her shoulders and lifted her clear of the body, back down the steps into the snow. "You done what you needed?" he asked after a time. She didn't answer. Her head rested against his shoulder. Her eyes were wide, unfocused. He brought her to his horse. "Can't leave him there," she murmured. The stranger looked back at the shack. "He dead. I don't care." That seemed to satisfy him. He helped her onto the horse, climbed up behind her. They rode, not fast, not far, but far enough. A line of bare cottonwoods marked the rise of a hill. Beyond it, the land sloped into an old gully, sheltered from wind. He built a fire. She didn't speak for hours. He didn't press her. By nightfall, she'd eaten. Not much. Enough. The veil hung beside the fire, steaming. She stared into the flames like they might burn the memory out of her. Finally, she asked, "Why did you stop?" He looked up from where he cleaned the rifle. "Back there, When he had the gun, why didn't you shoot? The stranger shrugged. You already knew what to do. She looked at him. The fire made her eyes look copper. You didn't know me. I saw you standing in that dress. Wind could have knocked you down, but it didn't. Thought maybe that meant something. Her hands tightened in her lap. People pass through all the time, she said. Nobody ever stopped. They ain't me. Silence again. The fire cracked. A log split. She said, my name's Mara. He nodded. Elias. She didn't smile, but her shoulders dropped. Elias, she repeated, testing the word. Where you headed? He asked. I was supposed to die. He poked the fire. Sparks flared. You didn't. She looked at her hands, at the blood dried beneath her nails. I don't know where to go. Then don't go yet. She said nothing. The wind outside the gully howled like teeth grinding bone. She wrapped the coat tighter, not for warmth, but for memory. You got people? He asked. No. Not anymore. Then what do you want? The question struck her, not like a weapon, but like a chisel. Cold and careful, splitting open something buried, she closed her eyes. I want him to be the last. Elias nodded. She didn't mean just that man, not just the one in the shack. She meant the whole string of them, the miners, the lawmen, the preacher's son, the ones who'd taken, broken, silenced, one by one. Then you need a plan, he said. She looked up. I can ride, she said quietly. I can shoot, not well, but I don't miss if I get close. He smiled faintly. That's a start. The fire burned low. Neither of them moved to sleep. Out in the dark, wolves howled. Mara listened, not with fear, but with understanding. They were calling to her. Come spring, the mountains thawed, but Mara did not. The journey took them east first, into the hills where roads vanished and the pines grew so thick you had to move sideways. Elias knew the land. He knew where to find water that hadn't turned bad, how to skin a hare without wasting the hide. Mara watched him carefully. She didn't ask questions, only learned. She was quieter now than before, but her silence was different. Not empty, not broken. It was the kind that listened. They rode from place to place, never staying long. In burnt-out logging camps and roadhouses where men stared too long, Mara stayed close to the wall. She didn't wear the veil anymore, but she carried it in her satchel, folded around a length of bone-white lace. When Elias asked what it was for, she said, funerals. He didn't press her. By the time they reached Cross Ridge, a hard little town tucked between two canyons, word had already started to follow them. Quiet word, unreliable. A woman in a wedding dress had killed 3 men with an axe near Broken Tooth Creek. Some said she was mad. Others said she wasn't a woman at all, but some spirit born of snow and vengeance. Mara heard these whispers in the saloons, in the traders' corners where the men drank and the women sold more than liquor. She listened without speaking. Elias kept watch while she did. At night, she practiced. They found an abandoned orchard east of town, the trees gone to rot. There she built her own targets from straw, bark, and bone. She used a pistol at first, then a knife, then the axe again. Elias watched her throw it with bare hands over and over until the skin split. She kept throwing. You want to be a killer, he said once. She turned. No, she answered. I want them to wish they never seen me. There were names she hadn't spoken aloud yet, faces she couldn't forget. Like the man who brought her from her father's homestead when she was just 15, promising her a church marriage. Who left her locked in a storeroom for 2 weeks before trading her to another man for 5 pelts and a silver ring. That ring still sat at the bottom of her satchel. When Elias found it, she said only, "It's not his anymore." Cross Ridge proved useful. There was a man there named Toller Briggs, a liar with a mouth full of gold teeth. He owned half the women in the gambling house and one of the sheriffs. He also ran freight caravans through territory known for ambush. Elias knew him from years back. He didn't like him, but he trusted his greed, so he made an offer. I need names, Elias told him. Men who run with fire in their hands and blood in their mouths. Toller grinned, eyes glittering like river glass. Plenty of those, you offering payment or vengeance? Both. Toller leaned back, the gold teeth catching lamplight. Well, he said, there's Jeb Clark out near Hollow Lake, runs a group called the Red Wake. Burned a homestead 2 winters ago, killed the parents, sold the daughter. Elias said nothing, but beside him, Mara's shoulders stiffened. You remember the girl's name? She asked quietly. Toller blinked, surprised. He didn't, but she did. It wasn't herself she was remembering. It was a neighbor's child. A girl with crooked teeth who braided her hair with horsehair charms. They took her in early spring. Mara hadn't seen her since. Where are they now? She asked. Toller shrugged. Last I heard, west of the bluffs. No one's gone after them and come back breathing. Mara turned to Elias. I want to go. He studied her face. You sure? She nodded once. He looked back at Toller. You best not be lying. Toller smirked. Wouldn't dream of it. They left before dawn. On the way to Hollow Lake, the land turned brutal. Rock outcroppings like jagged teeth tore at the sky. The snow was gone, but the mud swallowed horse hooves, and the trees stood crooked as drunkards. At the lake's edge, they found the first sign, a body strung to a tree by its ankles. Skin peeled from the chest in clean, slow lines. Mara didn't look away. He was a message, Elias said. She nodded. They buried him without speaking. 2 days later, they found the camp. 5 men, 1 woman bound, no fire lit. Just a low smoke trail and the scent of blood. Elias wanted to wait, to plan. Mara didn't. She went in at dusk. She moved like she had in the orchard, slow, precise, quiet. The first man died without noise, a blade beneath the chin. The second tried to run. He didn't get far. By the time the others knew what was happening, she was in their camp, veil tied around her face, axe swinging. She fought like she meant to erase something. Elias came in after the third fell. Covered her flank, shot the last one through the throat. The bound woman was still breathing. Mara cut her loose. She didn't say much, just handed her Elias' flask and pointed east. The woman ran without looking back. Mara stood over the last corpse, axe in her hand, veil soaked red. They remember now, she said softly. Elias didn't speak. In the dying light, Mara looked less like a bride and more like something risen out of winter's grave. She wasn't done, she was only beginning. The rains came down hard that spring, turning the roads into rivers and the rivers into coffins. Townsfolk told stories of children swept away while reaching for their boots. Bridges vanished. But Mara didn't slow. She started collecting names. Toller had given her 3. Jeb Clark was the first. The next was a man called Harrow Finn. Harrow was a slaver in all but name. He ran a freight company from Lantern Post, ferrying timber and salt to the military outposts. He paid boys to kidnap girls from broken towns, girls whose parents had starved or frozen, promised them food sometimes, shelter. Then sold them into a different kind of hunger. Mara had heard of him long before she knew his name. She remembered the girls who vanished and the silence that followed. Harrow's name made the silence make sense. They reached Lantern Post in a storm. The town smelled of rust and fire. Its main street was all mud and piss. Lanterns hung from hooks like hanged men's heads. Smoke from the furnaces never stopped. Elias didn't like it. He said so. They kill strangers here, he warned, especially ones who ask questions. Mara wasn't asking questions, she was making lists. They found Harrow's warehouse on the edge of town. Iron walls, guard dogs, a bell rigged on the roof. She watched the place for 2 nights from the loft of an old grain barn. She didn't speak, just mapped it in her head. On the 3rd night she moved. She wore a wool cloak, hood pulled low. Underneath, the veil was back, but now it was black. She set the fire first, oil through the feed slot, struck from a matchbook stolen at a saloon. When the flames rose, the dogs started barking. The bell clanged. Mara went in through the rear. She didn't go quiet this time. She wanted them to hear her. She left the axe in the first guard's chest. The second was older, faster. He raised a pistol, but she knocked it aside with a hammer swing and drove her knee into his gut. When he fell, she kept moving. Inside, the warehouse reeked of sweat and cedar. Bunks lined the back walls, too many for any one man's crew, crates stacked to the ceiling. And Harrow, standing in the center of it all, clutching a rifle, he wasn't what she expected, tall, thin. Pale as paper, the kind of man who hid behind contracts and bribes, but he raised the gun all the same. "You've made a mistake," he said, voice too calm. Mara said nothing. "I don't know who you are." "You do," she said. He blinked. "No, You took Clara Eves. You took Annalise Price. You took my sister." His mouth opened. Mara raised the hammer. He fired. The shot missed. Wild, shaking hands. She crossed the space between them before he could reload. The first blow broke his arm. The second knocked him to his knees. She didn't stop at the third. When Elias found her, the fire had climbed to the rafters. She stood over what was left of Harrow, Finn, breath steady, veil streaked with blood and smoke. "Any survivors?" she asked. He nodded, gestured behind him. A locked cellar, 6 girls, one barely older than 10. Mara helped them out, didn't say a word, she didn't smile, she didn't cry. Just handed the youngest a coat and pointed them east, same as before. They vanished into the rain. That night, Elias found Mara at the edge of the water, kneeling. She was washing the veil in the river, slow, careful. "It won't come out," he said. She didn't look up. "I know." He sat beside her. "How many more?" She unrolled the lace she kept in her satchel. There were 9 knots tied in it now, 9 names, 9 debts. "I'll stop when the cloth is full," she said. Elias nodded. Then, after a long pause, "And after that?" She stared at the current. "Then I bury it." "What about you?" "I don't know yet." The stars came out, the rain stopped, but the river kept moving. Mara closed her eyes and listened to it. Behind her, the warehouse burned to the stone. And somewhere far to the north, a man saw smoke on the horizon and knew his time was running out. They rode north, toward the old iron lines, where the tracks rusted through the pine and the rail towns had turned to ghost shells. The air smelled of old coal and copper dust. Smoke curled from the sawmills by day, but by night it was the coyote songs that ruled. Mara didn't speak much those weeks. Her face had grown leaner, her gait steadier. She walked like someone who'd learned to carry pain without flinching. She still wore the black veil when she went into towns, though now it was less disguise and more declaration. Elias said little, but he watched her like a man watches a storm cloud, knowing it's coming, but not sure how much it'll break. The next name came from a man called Cross. He was waiting for them in a mining camp called Astor's Hollow, nursing a gunshot wound and 2 broken ribs. He knew Elias from the war, said he owed him a favor. The favor came in the form of a story. Man you're after's called Danton Pike, used to run caravans down through Bitter Ridge. Now he deals in scars. "Scars?" Mara asked. Cross spat blood. "He runs a pit, fights, women mostly, men if they're pretty enough. Rich bastards pay to watch. Sometimes they bet, sometimes they just drink and grin." Mara's hands balled into fists. "Where?" Cross looked at her like someone watching a blade being forged. "South of the Iron Spine, old fort, stone walls, no law. They call it the baptism." She didn't ask why. They rode out that night. It took 5 days to find it. The road narrowed to little more than broken brush. No signs, No paths, just the tracks of carts, old blood, and silence. The baptism stood like a grave monument, grey walls risen from a gully, ringed with torchlight and guarded by men with rifles and dogs. Inside, they heard the screams before they saw the gates. Elias held her back. "This is different," he said. "You go in wrong, you don't come out." She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her satchel and pulled out the veil. She tied it slow, hands steady. Then she said, "I'm not going in wrong. I'm going in as what they made." They found a way through the southern wall, where the rock had cracked from frost and neglect. Mara slipped in under cover of a thunderstorm, veil soaked, face unreadable. Elias waited with the horses. He didn't argue. Inside the baptism was a circle of dirt and fire. The pit sat in the center, ringed by shouting men. No guards in sight, too many eyes. Mara kept her head low, moved through the crowd like smoke. The girl in the ring was barely 20, one eye swollen shut, no shoes. She was swinging a chain like it was part of her body, keeping back a man twice her size. Mara didn't blink. She watched the girl win. Then she asked a name. Danton Pike was up in the old chapel, watching, always watching. She found the stairs, took them two at a time. The chapel was dark. Only one lantern burned on the altar. Danton Pike stood at the window, smoking something sweet and vile. His coat was red velvet, his smile thin. He didn't turn when she entered. "They say you're death in a dress," he said. She said nothing. "They say you wear the veil of every girl who died screaming." She took a step forward. He turned. "You think you're the only one with a reason to hate me?" he asked. "You think you're the only ghost I made?" He drew a pistol. She was faster. The knife took him in the thigh first, then the shoulder. He screamed. She walked up to him, calm, careful. "Removed the veil. Do you remember Brenna Thorne?" she asked. His eyes widened. "She was 12, she said. You laughed when you threw her in the ring." He tried to crawl. She stepped on his hand. "Say her name," she said. He choked. She leaned close. "I'll say it." He did. She slit his throat. She didn't move for a long time afterward. Outside, the storm cracked open the sky. Screams turned to shouts. Fires flared. The pit was chaos. Mara stepped through it like it wasn't there. She found the girl who'd won the chain fight, handed her a coat, spoke only one word: "Run." Then she was gone, back to Elias, back to the dark. That night she burned the veil again, another knot tied in the cloth, 8 knots now. Just one left, but this one was different. It had no name, only a face, a voice, a promise whispered into her ear the night they took her from her home: "If you ever tell, no one will believe you. And if they do, I'll find you first." She had told, no one had believed, but now she was the one doing the finding, and he would be last. The land flattened as they rode east, the mountains shrinking behind them like something defeated. The soil turned to cracked shale and salt brush. Winds cut low and mean through the gullies, dragging sand like razors. Mara said nothing for days. Elias watched her change. Her face was leaner now, almost hollow, but it wasn't weakness. She'd shed something human along the road, something soft. Her voice, when she used it, was quieter than ever, but when she looked at you, it was like being judged. She didn't speak the last name, not even to Elias, but he knew she was close. They crossed through Dry Bend, a town not worth the ink on a map. The streets were empty, dust-choked, one saloon, no church, and one building standing newer than the rest, a courthouse, wood still pale. Inside, the judge sat fat behind a ledger. His name was Marlon Hux. He was the wrong man, but he said the right thing. "Mr. Fallen's got land just north of here. He's a good man, took in orphans, built his own chapel. People round here owe him a great deal." Myra didn't blink. "Fallen?" she asked. Hux nodded. "Used to be Reverend Fallen before the war, preached in the high country, moved here after his wife died. Real kind soul." Mara turned. Walked out without a word. Elias caught up to her on the street. "That's him," she said. "You sure?" She nodded once. "He had a different name then, but it's him. The last man, the one who started everything." When she was 13, he'd come to her town as a missionary, carried a Bible and a hunting knife, promised to build schools, took girls instead she hadn't told. Not until years later, when another girl's bones were found in the creek. By then he'd vanished, until now. They scouted the land that night. Fallen's homestead sat on a hill backed by cottonwoods. A chapel stood beside it. No cross, but the windows were stained. The glass caught firelight. Inside, Fallen sang. Not loudly, not tuneful, but slow, reverent. Mara listened from the brush, didn't flinch. The next morning she dressed differently. A plain skirt, white blouse, hair pinned, no veil. She left the axe behind. Elias didn't like it. "He's still dangerous," he said. "He thinks I'm gone," she replied. "Let him think it." She walked the road up to his house with dust on her hem and a bundle of wildflowers in her hands. Fallen opened the door. He didn't recognize her. He saw a girl, pale, calm, with the silence of someone he thought he'd broken long ago. "Child," he said gently, stepping forward, "are you all right?" "I've come for guidance," she answered. "I heard you preach." He smiled. She smiled back. He led her into the chapel. The pews were old, hand-built, candles burned low. There was a painting behind the pulpit of a lamb being cradled by bloodied hands. He gestured for her to sit. She did. He stood above her, hands folded. "You remind me of someone," he said after a moment. She looked up. "Do I?" He stepped closer. "You know, there was a girl once, long ago, thin as bone, big eyes, she looked like you." Mara didn't move. "She ran away," he said. "Tried to ruin me, but the Lord protected me." Her voice came cold. "Was the Lord in the room with her when you locked the door?" Fallen froze, his face changed. Not fear, not guilt, just calculation. "You," he whispered. Mara stood. "You said no one would believe me," she said. "You were right, they didn't." She reached into her blouse, drew the last veil, red lace, stained, brittle. "You said you'd find me first." He backed away. "I'm not afraid of you. I didn't come for fear." She stepped forward. "I came to finish the prayer." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't scream. She spoke the names of the girls he hurt, one by one. Each name was a blade. When she reached the end, she tied the veil to the chapel crossbeam and left it swaying. Then she took the knife Elias gave her, not the axe, not the hammer, just steel. She made it quick. When Elias entered the chapel, Fallen was slumped against the pulpit, his mouth open, his eyes wide. Mara sat in the front pew, face blank. She held the cloth in her lap, the lace now full, 9 knots. "Is it done?" Elias asked. She looked at him. "For me, yes." He nodded. "What now?" She untied the veil from the crossbeam, folded it slow. "I'll bury this, and then I'll go where no one remembers what I looked like." "You want me to come?" She didn't answer for a long time. Then quietly, "You already did." They left together. Behind them, the chapel door swung wide in the wind. No one wept for Fallen. No one claimed the body. And in the hills beyond Dry Bend, beneath a lone pine, Mara dug a grave for a dress, a veil, and the girl she used to be. They rode past the edge of every map, through canyons too narrow for wagons, over ridges where no name had ever held, into valleys where the silence pressed like stone. The land turned wild and clean, untouched by fences or men who made promises with knives. Mara didn't wear black anymore. She wore canvas and hide. Her hair was unbound. The axe stayed tied to her saddle, and the lace stayed buried beneath that pine near Dry Bend. But vengeance leaves a shape behind. It carves it into the body. Elias saw it in how she rose early, never startled by wind or sound. in the way she checked their trail even when no one followed, in how she slept light as bone on stone. They found a hollow high in the hills, fed by a spring and ringed with juniper. There were no houses, no graves, no echoes of what came before. They made camp there. Elias built a shelter with rough beams and thick canvas. Mara hunted, skinned, planted seeds from a stolen pouch. The world didn't soften, but it steadied. They spoke little. One morning, as the mist burned off the brush and birds began their chorus, Mara sat sharpening her blade and said, "I remember her." Elias looked up. "My sister," she said, "before. I remember how she'd sneak plum wine when no one watched. How she braided my hair crooked, always too tight." She paused. "I didn't let myself remember. Not until now." Elias nodded. They said nothing else that day. More time passed. Seasons don't count the same when you've stepped outside the world. One night, as stars settled low over the pines and a cold wind came whispering from the west, Elias handed Mara a tin box. Inside was a folded scrap of newspaper. The ink faded but readable. It was her, not named, not fully, just rumor. "Veiled woman kills again, justice or curse." She read it twice. Then she held it over the fire. The flames ate it slow. Elias said, "People will keep telling that story, even when they forget your name." Mara watched the last of the paper curl. Let them. In the spring, they took in a boy. He came alone, shoes wrapped in twine, eyes skinned raw from wind and road. He said nothing at first, just stared like an animal left too long in a trap. Mara didn't press. She gave him food, then space. He stayed. Later, he told her a name, then a place. Then a man who'd done something terrible and walked free. Mara listened. She said only, "You don't owe me that." The boy stared at the ground. "I want to be like you." "No," she said, "you don't." He looked up. She met his eyes. "But you can be better." Elias taught him to shoot. Mara taught him when not to. He started smiling again, just now and then. Time passed. One evening, long after the rains, Mara stood at the edge of their hollow, veil in her hands. The last one, not the black, not the red. This one was white again, bleached by moonlight and time. She laid it on the ground. She lit a fire, watched it burn. The wind carried the ash toward the ridgeline where no one could follow. She turned, walked back toward the shelter, where Elias waited with tin cups and something warm, where the boy already slept. She didn't speak, didn't need to. She had nothing left to bury, nothing left to hunt. Only the life that waited in the quiet that comes after vengeance. A life she had no name for, and maybe that was the point. She'd never been just a bride. She had been the snow, the silence, the reckoning. And now, at last, she was the woman who walked away.